I'm not a lawyer, so I've got no idea about that. But he is the heir to the throne, and I don't think that there are many companies that really want him absolutely disgusted by them. I don't think that's a good idea for anybody, and I would hope that if he couldn't do it via
London, a new royal dispute is quietly escalating behind palace walls, and this time it centers on the legacy of Princess Diana. Sources close to the Prince of Wales claim that Prince William is considering all available options, including potential legal consultation, after learning of reported plans by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle to mark the 30th anniversary of Diana's death with a major documentary project. The reported production, expected to align with the couple's commercial media partnerships, has reignited long-standing tensions between the brothers. At the heart of the issue is what insiders describe as a private understanding, reached during the 20th anniversary commemorations in 2017, a shared decision, at the time, that large-scale anniversary programming would not become a recurring commercial event. That year, both brothers participated in landmark tributes, including projects for the BBC and ITV, aiming to present a unified remembrance of their mother. According to palace sources, those productions were intended to serve as a definitive public reflection, personal, respectful, and carefully managed. Nearly a decade later, the possibility of a new documentary tied to a global streaming platform has reportedly struck a nerve. Insiders suggest William views the idea of revisiting Diana's story in a commercial framework as crossing a deeply personal boundary. While he acknowledges that both sons have the right to speak about their mother, the involvement of external producers, and particularly Meghan's behind-the-scenes influence, is said to be the central concern. The sons, however, are understood to see the matter differently. Sources sympathetic to Harry argue that he believes he holds an inherent right, as Diana's son, to participate in projects that reflect her legacy. From this perspective, Diana's memory is not owned by the institution, nor subject to palace approval. The argument is rooted in autonomy, a principle Harry has consistently emphasized since stepping back from senior royal duties in 2020, but the disagreement is layered. The reported streaming involvement raises additional sensitivities, particularly given William's widely documented discomfort with royal portrayals in dramatized formats. Industry observers note that previous high-profile royal series have sparked tensions within the family, especially when fictionalized elements blurred the lines between storytelling and reality. Legal experts caution that any effort to halt a documentary would face significant obstacles. A so-called gentleman's agreement, even if publicly acknowledged, carries no formal contractual weight unless documented. As Diana's sons, both William and Harry retain the right to share personal reflections. However, while the legal route may be limited, reputational leverage could carry influence. Media companies often weigh long-term institutional relationships carefully, particularly when future access to royal initiatives is involved. Beyond legal mechanics, the emotional dimension remains central. The 30th anniversary of Diana's passing will inevitably renew global attention. How that remembrance is shaped, and by whom, could redefine the public narrative surrounding her legacy. For now, there is no official confirmation of the project's development. Palace aides have declined comment. Representatives for the Sussexes have not publicly addressed the reports. What is clear, however, is that the question is no longer simply about a documentary. It is about control, memory, and the evolving relationship between two brothers navigating legacy under very different definitions of duty as. Discussion around the proposed anniversary documentary intensifies. Attention has shifted from emotion to strategy. According to multiple media reports, including claims originating from Radar Online, advisors close to Prince William believe the situation has moved beyond private disagreement and into reputational risk management. Sources describe the Prince of Wales as deeply distressed by the possibility that his mother's memory could become the focal point of another commercial streaming venture. While there has been no formal legal filing, palace insiders suggest William is consulting senior aides to explore what influence, if any, may exist through institutional channels rather than direct litigation. From a legal standpoint, experts note the limitations. Princess Diana's life story, as a historical public figure, cannot be restricted by copyright ownership in the conventional sense. Her sons retain personal rights to speak about their experiences, unless defamatory content were involved, which no report suggests. Legal grounds for injunction appear narrow. However, leverage in media disputes does not always originate in courtrooms. Industry analysts point to the role of platform relationships. If the documentary were to move forward under an existing partnership with Netflix, executives would likely assess the broader impact. The company has previously collaborated on royal-adjacent content, including dramatized portrayals that reportedly frustrated members of the family. Any new projects centered directly on Diana would carry significant global visibility. The commercial appeal is undeniable. Diana remains one of the most recognized women in modern history. A 30th anniversary documentary, particularly with the involvement of Prince Harry, would likely command substantial viewership. From a business perspective, such a project presents high engagement potential. But engagement comes with political complexity. Sources close to William argue that the difference between private reflection and market-driven storytelling is crucial. They maintain that the 20th anniversary tributes produced for the BBC and ITV were carefully constructed to honor Diana's humanitarian legacy, rather than revisit institutional grievances. In contrast, critics fear a 30th anniversary series could reopen debates about the monarchy's handling of her life and death. Supporters of Harry counter that revisiting those themes is precisely the point. They argue that Diana's experience with media scrutiny and institutional pressure remains historically relevant, particularly in conversations about privacy and public accountability. From this viewpoint, telling her story outside palace structures ensures independence. Another layer of tension reportedly involves Meghan Markle's participation. Insiders aligned with William suggest discomfort over her perceived role in shaping projects tied to Diana's legacy. For them, the matter is not solely commercial but symbolic, a question of who frames the narrative of a woman whose image still resonates globally. Yet, Hollywood operates on practical realities. If one streaming service hesitated, others, such as Apple TV Plus or Amazon Prime Video, could theoretically enter negotiations. Once a project enters the open marketplace, containment becomes increasingly difficult. This leaves William's options largely strategic rather than judicial. Diplomatic conversations, indirect signaling, or appeals to long-term brand partnerships may carry more weight than legal threats. Whether such influence would alter corporate calculations remains uncertain. Meanwhile, no formal announcement of a documentary has been made. Representatives for the Sussexes have neither confirmed nor denied development reports. Palace officials continued to decline comment. What remains clear is that the disagreement touches more than programming decisions. It reflects two contrasting philosophies, one rooted in institutional stewardship of legacy, the other in personal ownership of memory. As the 30th anniversary approaches, the question is not only whether a documentary will be produced, but whether the brothers' already fragile relationship can withstand another public chapter. Beyond the immediate question of whether a documentary will proceed lies a deeper issue: control over narrative. For Prince Harry, those familiar with his public statements say the matter is personal before it is political. He has repeatedly argued that his mother's life and the institutional failures he believes surrounded it deserve continued examination outside palace influence. In previous interviews, Harry has spoken openly about unresolved grief and his view that aspects of Princess Diana's experience were mishandled by those tasked with protecting her. Supporters say this perspective explains why he may feel compelled to revisit her story, particularly as milestone anniversaries renew global focus. However, for Prince William, the approach appears fundamentally different. Those close to the Prince of Wales describe his stance as one centered on preservation rather than relitigation. William has often emphasized Diana's humanitarian achievements, her advocacy on landmines, HIV awareness, and homelessness rather than the internal conflicts that defined her later years. His allies argue that repeated revisiting of personal grievances risks overshadowing the charitable legacy she worked to build. This philosophical divide has widened since 2020, when Harry and Meghan Markle stepped back from official royal duties and entered into commercial media agreements. Their high-profile interviews and documentary projects have frequently revisited institutional tensions. Critics say another anniversary production could follow that pattern. Supporters insist it would offer context and healing. Industry observers note that anniversary programming is not unusual for global historical figures. Major milestones often trigger retrospectives across publishing, broadcasting, and streaming platforms. What makes this situation unique is the involvement of Diana's immediate family and the unresolved tension between them. Another factor shaping the debate is public appetite. Diana's story continues to generate significant international interest decades after her death. Streaming executives understand that milestone anniversaries can drive viewership, particularly when paired with first-person testimony. Yet high viewership does not eliminate reputational risk. Corporate partners must consider how association with divisive narratives could impact future collaborations, especially with institutions as enduring as the British monarchy. While there is no evidence of direct palace intervention, soft power, long-term relationships, ceremonial partnerships, future access remains an undercurrent in any decision involving royal subjects. Analysts caution that even if a documentary were framed as balanced and respectful, interpretation would vary widely. For some audiences, any commercial project tied to Diana's anniversary could appear exploitative. For others, it may represent a son exercising autonomy in telling his mother's story. The absence of formal confirmation adds further complexity. Without an official announcement, much of the current debate is based on reported development discussions rather than finalized production plans. Still, the broader implication is clear. The 30th anniversary will not pass quietly, whether through official private remembrance or independent programming. Diana's legacy will again command international attention. The central question remains unresolved, not whether her story deserves to be told, but who determines how it is told, and under what terms. As the 30th anniversary approaches, what began as a reported development discussion now symbolizes something larger: the ongoing evolution of the royal narrative in a modern media age. For observers of the monarchy, the situation highlights how legacy management has changed dramatically since 1997. In the immediate aftermath of Princess Diana's death, control over public messaging largely rested within traditional institutions and established broadcasters. Today, global streaming platforms, independent production companies, and personal brand partnerships operate with far greater autonomy. This shift places figures like Prince William and Prince Harry on fundamentally different strategic paths. William's role as future monarch ties him closely to institutional continuity. His public work often emphasizes stability, long-term charitable initiatives, and carefully curated messaging. Those aligned with his perspective argue that Diana's humanitarian legacy should remain the primary focus, her campaigns against landmines, her compassion for marginalized communities, and her influence on modernizing the monarchy's public image. Harry's trajectory, by contrast, operates outside that framework. Since relocating to the United States with Meghan Markle, he has pursued media projects that reflect personal experience and individual narrative. Supporters say this independence allows him to speak candidly about history without institutional limitation. Critics argue it blurs the line between remembrance and commercial enterprise. Legal analysts continue to suggest that formal intervention would be unlikely unless specific factual disputes arose. As Diana's sons both retain moral and personal standing to share their reflections, the disagreement therefore centers less on rights and more on optics. How a global audience interprets motive and timing. Streaming platforms, including potential partners such as Netflix, must weigh those optics carefully. Anniversary programming guarantees attention, but attention does not always equal positive reception. Public reaction would likely depend on tone, framing, and whether the project emphasizes tribute or confrontation. For now, no confirmed documentary schedule has been announced. Palace representatives remain silent, and Sussex spokespeople have not provided clarification. In the absence of official statements, speculation continues to dominate headlines. Yet beyond speculation lies a deeper truth. Diana's legacy belongs to history, as much as it belongs to her family. Any anniversary will inevitably reignite global conversation about her life, her struggles, and her influence. The coming months will reveal whether that conversation unfolds through unified remembrance or parallel narratives, shaped by two brothers who once stood side by side. Whatever form it takes, the anniversary will serve as another chapter in an evolving story, not only about a princess whose impact endures, but about how legacy, memory, and modern media intersect in an era where personal narrative can travel worldwide in an instant. In the end, the reported disagreement surrounding the 30th anniversary is not simply about a documentary. It reflects a broader transformation in how history is preserved, interpreted, and presented to a global audience. Nearly 3 decades after her passing, Princess Diana remains one of the most influential and emotionally resonant figures of the modern era. Her humanitarian campaigns reshaped perceptions of royalty, her vulnerability humanized an institution often viewed as distant, and her tragic death permanently altered the relationship between the monarchy and the public. That legacy carries immense symbolic weight. For Prince William, safeguarding that weight appears tied to continuity. As heir to the throne, his responsibility extends beyond personal memory into institutional stewardship. Those close to him suggest that remembrance, in his view, should unify rather than divide, emphasizing service, compassion, and long-term impact rather than revisiting historical conflict. For Prince Harry, remembrance may represent something more personal and less constrained. His public reflections over recent years indicate a belief that unresolved aspects of the past deserve acknowledgement. Supporters argue that speaking openly honors Diana's authenticity. Critics question whether commercial platforms are the appropriate vehicle for such reflection, adding further, complexity is the evolving role of media itself. Streaming giants, global distribution networks, and independent production deals have redefined storytelling power. A narrative once filtered through traditional broadcasters can now reach millions instantly. Framed through personal perspective rather than institutional voice, that shift leaves little room for quiet disagreement. If a documentary moves forward, its tone will determine public reaction. A project centered on humanitarian achievements could foster broad support. A production revisiting institutional tensions may reignite debate. Either way, the 30th anniversary will draw international attention, with or without coordinated participation. What remains undeniable is that Diana's influence transcends internal disputes. Her work on landmine awareness, her advocacy for HIV patients, and her empathetic engagement with marginalized communities continue to inspire new generations. Those achievements stand independent of present-day disagreements. In many ways, the unfolding situation illustrates how legacy evolves over time. It is shaped not only by those who inherit it, but by the cultural environment in which it is revisited. Anniversaries invite reflection, but they also invite reinterpretation. As the milestone approaches, official silence leaves room for speculation. Yet the ultimate measure may not be whether one narrative prevails over another. It may instead be how respectfully her memory is handled by family, by institutions, and by the global platforms that carry her story forward. Because beyond headlines and strategic considerations lies a simple truth. The world will remember Diana. The question is not whether her story will be told again, but how it will be told, and whether that telling honors the spirit of compassion that defined her life.